It's funny how life works, isn't it? You can go days, months, or even years thinking you know exactly what your life is supposed to look like, when, in reality, all it takes is one moment to turn everything upside down. That's how I met him. It wasn't some grand cinematic moment where everything slows down and the world goes silent. No, it was far more subtle. It happened in the quiet moments, the kind you don't even realize are significant until much later. I'd been coming to this park for weeks. It was my spot, a place to clear my head, to escape from the chaos of my daily routine. The bench I always sat on, tucked under the shade of a large oak tree, had become my sanctuary. I'd sit there, headphones in, lost in my thoughts or scrolling through my phone, the world fading into the background. But that day was different. I remember it clearly. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow across the park, and I was sitting on my usual bench, my favorite playlist softly playing in my ears. As I looked up from my phone, I noticed him, a guy sitting on a bench across the path, reading a book. His face was relaxed, his expression calm, but there was something in the way he held the book that caught my attention. It wasn't just the book, but the way he was lost in it, as if the world around him didn't exist. I couldn't help but watch him for a moment. There was something magnetic about him, something gentle. He looked to be about my age, maybe a little older. His hair was tousled, dark but with lighter strands that glimmered in the sunlight. His smile, when he did smile, was effortless, like he had all the time in the world to enjoy the little things. His presence, though subtle, was impossible to ignore. I don't know how long I stared, but the moment we made eye contact, I quickly looked away, feeling a rush of heat to my cheeks. My heart began to beat a little faster, and for a second, I wondered if I had just embarrassed myself by staring too long. But then, a soft chuckle reached my ears. I glanced back, and there he was, smiling, his eyes sparkling with a playful warmth like he had caught me in a harmless little moment. "Sorry," I mumbled, offering a shy smile of my own. I didn't know what else to say. It was one of those awkward moments, but somehow it felt right. "No need to apologize," he said, his voice soft but confident. "I was just wondering if you'd be interested in joining me. I promise I won't bite." I chuckled nervously, realizing that I had been caught in an unintentional staring match. But his tone was kind, his words lighthearted, and it made me feel more at ease than I expected. With a deep breath, I took a chance. I stood up and walked over to his bench. "I suppose I could use a break from the world of my phone," I said, with a playful smirk of my own. As I sat down beside him, the first thing I noticed was how easily the conversation started to flow. We talked about everything. Books, movies, life, what brought us to this park. It wasn't forced or awkward. It just felt like we had known each other forever, even though we had just met. There was an effortless connection between us, as if the universe had aligned in that exact moment to bring us together. I learned his name was Noah. He had just moved to the city a few months ago, and he came to the park whenever he needed to clear his head. He told me he loved reading, especially stories that felt real. The kind of books where you could lose yourself and feel like you were a part of the character's world. We talked for what felt like hours, the sun dipping lower in the sky until it finally sank behind the horizon, leaving only the soft glow of twilight around us. It was one of those moments when everything around you seems to fade away, and the only thing that matters is the person sitting next to you. "I don't usually do this," I said as the conversation wound down. "Just walk up to people and start talking. But I'm glad I did." Noah laughed softly. "Me too. It's not every day you meet someone who doesn't mind talking about the little things." And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. There was an unspoken promise between us, a quiet understanding that somehow we were going to see each other again. It wasn't a grand declaration or some dramatic moment. It was just a feeling that something beautiful could begin with a simple conversation under the fading light of a perfect evening. It's funny how quickly a place can feel like home when you find someone who makes it feel that way. Noah and I had kept in touch after that first meeting, texting each other occasionally about everything and nothing at all. It felt easy, effortless. And every time we made plans to meet, I felt a little spark of excitement, like something was just beginning to bloom. We hadn't spent much time together outside of the park yet, but didn't matter. Every time I saw him, there was this magnetic pull between us. It wasn't just his smile or the way he laughed at my silly jokes, it was how comfortable he made me feel, how every conversation felt like it was building towards something bigger. That afternoon, I was back at the park, sitting on the same bench we had shared during our first conversation. I'd arrived early, hoping to catch him before he had a chance to get too busy with his own life. We hadn't set a specific time, but I knew he would be there. He always was. As the minutes passed, I started to feel a little nervous. I couldn't explain why, but it felt like something important was about to happen. Maybe it was the fact that each time we met, it felt like we were moving closer to something unspoken, something neither of us dared to put into words yet. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that I couldn't stop thinking about him. Just as the thought crossed my mind, I heard footsteps approaching, light and steady. I turned to see Noah walking towards me, looking as effortlessly handsome as ever. His hair was tousled in that charming way that made him look like he had just rolled out of bed, and yet it only made him more endearing. When he saw me, his face lit up with that same warm smile that always made my heart skip a beat. "Hey, you," he said, sitting down beside me without hesitation. "You're looking extra cute today. I think you're trying to outshine the sunset." I laughed, surprised by the compliment. "Outshine the sunset? I think that's a bit ambitious, don't you think?" "Nope," he said with a smirk. "I'm just speaking the truth." He looked at me for a moment, his eyes soft but intense. "But then again, maybe you are a little bit like the sunset, a little mysterious, a little out of reach, but totally worth the wait." His words hit me unexpectedly, sending a warm shiver down my spine. I didn't know how to respond at first, but the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world, made everything else fade into the background. "Maybe I'm just waiting for the right person to notice me," I said, glancing down, suddenly shy. "I don't think anyone's really ever looked at me that way before." He reached over and gently lifted my chin, making me meet his gaze. His touch was light but deliberate, his eyes full of something deep and sincere. "Well," he said, his voice low and smooth, "I've definitely noticed you, and I'm not going anywhere." The way he said it with such certainty sent my heart racing. I was suddenly aware of how close we were sitting, how his body leaned just a little toward mine. It was as if every word, every glance, every gesture was bringing us closer to something more, something undeniable. There was an undeniable tension in the air now, and it wasn't just the way he was looking at me. It was something else, something we hadn't spoken about but both felt, something between us, hanging in the silence. I leaned in slightly, just enough to close the distance between us. "Are you sure about that?" I whispered, my voice a little softer than usual. Noah didn't hesitate. He closed the space between us, his lips brushing mine, just barely at first, as if testing the waters. I could feel his breath against my skin, the warmth of his body so close to mine. The kiss was gentle, but there was something electric about it, a spark that ignited every nerve in my body. And when we pulled away, I felt both grounded and completely lost at the same time. "Yeah," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sure." And in that moment, everything else faded away. It didn't matter that we hadn't known each other long, or that we weren't sure where this was going. What mattered was that, right then, we were two people who had found something real, something worth exploring, something that didn't need words to explain, just the quiet understanding between us. We spent the rest of the afternoon together, talking, laughing, and stealing small moments of quiet intimacy. There was a new tension between us now, a playful, teasing energy that neither of us could ignore. But we both knew we didn't need to rush. We could take our time, let things unfold as they were meant to. The sun began to set, the sky painted in hues of pink, purple, and orange. And as we walked side by side through the park, our fingers brushed. It was a simple touch, but it felt like a promise that this was only the beginning of something beautiful. Be the type of person to feel nervous about a date. It's not like I was inexperienced or anything. I'd been on my fair share of dates before, some good, some forgettable. But with Noah, this felt different. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't sure if it was the idea of spending more time with him, or the way he made my heart race just by smiling at me that had me feeling like I was walking on air. After the park, Things moved pretty quickly between us. Every moment felt so natural, and yet there was this constant undercurrent of excitement. The kind of excitement you can't put into words, the kind that makes your stomach flip every time their hand brushes against yours. Our conversations were easier than ever, like we were already comfortable enough to be vulnerable with each other, but we both knew there was more to uncover. Tonight, we were finally having dinner together. A proper date, as Noah put it. And as I sat across from him at the dimly lit restaurant, sipping on a glass of wine, I couldn't help but notice how the candlelight danced across his face, making his features look even more handsome than usual. He was effortlessly charming, his smile warm and inviting, and his laugh, it was the kind of laugh that could fill a room with light. "I'm glad we're doing this," Noah said, his eyes meeting mine across the table. His voice was a little softer than usual, a playful edge to it, like he was teasing me without even trying. "Yeah," I replied, trying to hide the grin that threatened to take over my face. "I think we should have done it sooner." He leaned forward slightly, the movement intimate in its own way. "Well, better late than never," he said with a grin. "And now I have an excuse to spend the whole evening with you. I mean, it's not every day I get to sit across from someone who looks as good as you." I felt my cheeks heat up, the compliment catching me off guard. "You know," I said, trying to hide my smile, "flattery will get you everywhere." "Good," Noah said, his eyes glinting mischievously. "I'm glad to know I'm on the right track." We continued talking, the conversation flowing smoothly as we shared stories and joked around. Every time Noah looked at me, I felt this pull, this magnetic connection that was hard to ignore. It wasn't just his looks or the chemistry we had, it was the way we seemed to fit together. Our personalities, our sense of humor, the way we could share little moments of silence without feeling awkward. It felt like we were already in sync without even trying. But as the evening went on, the tone between us started to shift. The playful teasing began to take on a deeper, more intimate quality. Our touches lingered just a little longer, his hand brushing mine, his fingers trailing over my wrist when he reached for his wine glass. There was a certain energy building, something that felt like it was only a matter of time before we both gave into it. After dessert, chocolate mousse, the kind that's too rich but somehow perfect, we decided to take a walk through the nearby park. It was quiet now, the streets almost empty, and the cool evening air felt refreshing against my skin. Noah's hand brushed against mine once more, but this time I didn't pull away. Instead, I turned my palm up, offering it to him. Without a word, he took my hand in his, the warmth of his skin sending a jolt of electricity through my entire body. We walked side by side, the silence between us comfortable, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. The kind of tension that makes your heart race just a little faster, your breath catch in your throat, and your mind start to wander. I could feel Noah's presence beside me, every step, every move, as though he was pulling me toward him without even trying. "I've been thinking about something," Noah said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Yeah?" I replied, a little breathless, trying to act casual, even though my heart was pounding. He stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression serious now. "I like you. A lot, and I don't just mean in that let's have fun and see where this goes kind of way. I mean, I really like you. I don't know what this is yet, but I don't want to run away from it." I froze for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Was this real? Was he really saying what I thought he was? "I like you too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "More than I've ever liked anyone in a long time." Noah smiled, his eyes softening as he took a step closer to me. "Then let's stop pretending like we don't know what's happening here," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Let's just be honest about it." Before I could respond, he leaned in, closing the distance between us, and kissed me. It was slow, deliberate, and full of the promise of what was to come. His lips were soft but firm against mine, and as the kiss deepened, all I could think about was how perfect this felt. There was no rushing, no force. Just a quiet understanding that this was something real, something worth holding on to. When we pulled away, I found myself grinning like a fool, my heart fluttering in a way I hadn't felt in so long. "So, no running away, huh?" I teased, my voice playful. "Nope," he said, laughing softly. "No running away. Not now. Not ever." And in that moment, I knew he was serious. This wasn't just a fleeting thing. Whatever this was, It was real. Things were moving fast, but I wasn't scared. Not anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. It had been a week since our walk through the park, and my connection with Noah had only grown stronger. Our conversations felt deeper, more meaningful. We weren't just talking about favorite books or movies anymore. We were talking about real things, our dreams, our fears, the things that kept us up at night. We were opening up to each other in a way that felt natural, effortless, and somehow that made me feel closer to him than ever before. Tonight, he was at my place. No plans, no expectations, just the two of us, curled up on the couch under a warm blanket. The soft glow of the lamp cast shadows along the walls, filling the space with a quiet intimacy. The world outside felt distant, unimportant. All that mattered was that we were here, together. Noah had made us hot cocoa, and now we sat side by side, sipping it in silence. Every once in a while, his knee would brush against mine, sending a tiny spark of electricity through my body. It wasn't the first time we'd been this close, but tonight, something felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, something unspoken lingering between us. After a while, Noah exhaled softly and turned to look at me. "I've been thinking about something." I tilted my head. "Yeah? What is it?" He hesitated for a second, as if searching for the right words. "This thing between us, it feels easy, natural, like we've known each other forever, but at the same time, it kind of terrifies me." That caught me off guard. "Terrifies you?" "Yeah," he admitted, his voice quieter now, "because I don't want to mess it up." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the way his usual confidence softened just a little. It made my heart ache, in the best way. I reached over, resting my hand on top of his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You don't have to be scared," I said softly. "I feel the same way. But I think, whatever this is, we're figuring it out together." Noah held my gaze for a long moment before the corners of his mouth lifted into a small smile. "Together," he repeated, as if testing how the word felt on his tongue. I smiled back. "Yeah." We sat in silence for a moment, just existing in each other's presence. There was no need to fill the space with words. It was enough just to be here, to know that we were on the same page. Then, Noah shifted slightly, turning more toward me. His expression was different now, more certain. "I think I want more," he said, his voice low. I raised an eyebrow, teasing. "More?" "Yeah," he said, his lips curling into a grin. "More than just talking, more than just hanging out. I want to be with you, in every way." Something warm bloomed in my chest. The way he said it, so sure, so honest, made my pulse quicken. "Well," I murmured, my breath catching just a little, "I think I'm ready for that too." Noah didn't hesitate. He leaned in, his lips brushing against mine, slow and deliberate. The kiss was different this time. Not just excitement or longing, but something deeper. It was trust, a silent promise. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested against each other, our breaths mingling in the quiet. "I want this," Noah whispered. "I want us." I smiled, feeling something settle inside me, something steady, something real. "I do too." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a fleeting connection. This was something real, something worth holding on to. We spent the rest of the night talking, laughing, sharing quiet moments of intimacy, getting to know each other beyond words. It felt like we were building something that was just ours. Later, as I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, I closed my eyes and let myself simply exist in the moment. No worries, no second guessing. With Noah by my side, I wasn't waiting for something to happen anymore. I was living it. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. It was the perfect reflection of how I felt in that moment. Calm, content, and full of quiet possibility. We had spent the night talking, laughing, sharing pieces of ourselves that had never felt so easy to give to someone else before. It still amazed me how natural it all felt, how effortless. Like, Noah and I were meant to be in each other's lives, even if we had only just found our way to this point. Lying beside him now, I could hear the steady rhythm of his breath, feel the warmth of his hand resting against my waist. We hadn't spoken much since waking up, but there was no need for words. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Eventually, as the morning light grew brighter, Noah stirred. He turned toward me with a sleepy smile, his hair tousled, his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky. "Good morning," I replied, my voice softer, but just as full of warmth. He propped himself up on one elbow, his gaze tracing over my face like he was trying to memorize every detail. There was something about the way he looked at me that sent a familiar flutter through my chest. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment, his tone gentle but serious. I tilted my head slightly. "About what?" Noah hesitated for just a second, his fingers brushing lightly against my cheek. I could see the thoughts swirling behind his eyes, the way he was carefully choosing his words. "About us. About everything," he said finally. His words sent a rush of anticipation through me, my heartbeat quickening, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. I could tell this wasn't just casual morning conversation. This was something important, something that had been on his mind for a while. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady despite the nervous energy buzzing in my chest. Noah let out a slow breath, running a hand through his messy hair before meeting my gaze again. His eyes, those familiar, steady eyes, held nothing but sincerity. "I just feel like we've got something good here, something real, and I don't want to screw it up." I reached for his hand without hesitation, threading my fingers through his, anchoring him in the moment. "You're not going to screw it up," I said, my voice firm but full of warmth. "Noah, I feel the same way. Every day it feels more and more like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, with you." His smile was small but full of relief, his fingers tightening around mine. "I'm glad you feel that way," he admitted, his voice softer now as if he was afraid to say too much. "Because I want more than just this moment with you. I want to build something real, a future, with you." The words settled in the space between us, their weight undeniable. A future. It wasn't something I had dared to think about before, not with this much clarity, not with this much certainty. But hearing Noah say it, hearing him want it too, made it feel not just possible, but inevitable. I smiled, feeling something warm and steady take root in my chest. "I want that too," I said, the words coming out easier than I expected. More than I ever thought I would. Noah exhaled softly, his expression melting into something impossibly tender. He leaned down, pressing a slow, lingering kiss to my forehead. "You make everything feel right," he whispered against my skin. "And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words settle deep inside me. I knew we both carried our own fears. Fears about commitment, about the unknown. But right now, those fears didn't matter. What mattered was this. Us. When I opened my eyes again, I found Noah watching me, waiting. His gaze was steady, filled with something I could only describe as certainty, and I knew in that moment that I felt the exact same way. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered, giving his hand a squeeze. "We've got this." His smile was immediate, his whole body relaxing with the promise we had just made to each other. And with that, everything shifted. We weren't just two people falling for each other anymore. We were building something real, together, a future. Later that day, we ventured outside for a walk through the nearby woods. The air was crisp, carrying the last warmth of late summer, and the trees stood tall, their leaves whispering softly in the breeze. The world around us felt still, like it was waiting, like it knew something important was unfolding between us. We walked side by side, our hands brushing occasionally, our steps falling into an easy rhythm. It always felt like this with Noah. Effortless, like we belonged in each other's space. Our conversation drifted, as it often did, toward the future. What would happen after this weekend? Would we keep going with the flow, taking things day by day? Or was it time to talk about where we saw ourselves in the months ahead? "I don't know," I admitted, my voice thoughtful. "But I do know one thing. I want you with me. Whatever happens next, I want to share it with you." Noah turned to me then, a slow grin spreading across his face. That's all I needed to hear. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't about having everything figured out. It wasn't about meticulously planning each step ahead of time. What mattered was that we were willing to move forward together. The future was uncertain, yes, but with Noah by my side, it didn't feel so scary anymore. Life has a way of surprising you. You spend so much time thinking you know what you want, only to realize that everything you truly need has been right in front of you all along. Noah and I had come a long way since that weekend in the cabin. We'd had our ups and downs, moments of doubt and uncertainty, But through it all, one thing had remained the same: our connection. We didn't need grand gestures or over-the-top declarations. Just being together, being ourselves, was enough. And somehow, that felt like more than enough. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the city was alive with movement. People filled the sidewalks, enjoying the weekend, the air buzzing with conversation and laughter. As we walked, our hands brushed now and then, our smiles soft and easy. Noah glanced at me, something playful in his expression. "So I've been thinking," he said, his tone teasing but warm. "We've been together for months now, and I think it's time we take things to the next level." I raised an eyebrow. "The next level? What exactly do you mean?" His grin widened. "I mean, maybe we stop pretending we're just a new couple and actually start living our life together. Start planning for the future." The way he said it, so casual, yet so sure, made my heart skip a beat. We had been together for a while now, but something about hearing him talk about our future like it was already set in stone made everything feel real in a way I hadn't expected. "Are you saying you want to move in together?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended, my heart suddenly racing. Noah shrugged playfully, but there was sincerity in his eyes. "Why not? We basically live together already, and besides..." He hesitated for just a second before adding, "I like the idea of waking up next to you every day." The thought of it, of us sharing a home, building something together, sent warmth through me, filling every corner of my chest. "I think I'd like that," I said, squeezing his hand. And just like that, everything seemed to click into place. We didn't need to overthink it. We didn't need a big, dramatic discussion. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. Just another step forward in something that already felt like home. As we kept walking, we started talking about the little things: where we might live, how we decorate, what kind of plants we'd get. The conversation was light, filled with laughter, but underneath it, there was something real. A sense of excitement, of possibility. That evening, we found ourselves at a quiet cafe, sipping warm drinks as the city hummed around us. I watched Noah across the table, the soft glow of the cafe lights making his face look even softer, even more familiar. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. This was it. This was where I was meant to be, with him. "I'm glad we're doing this," I said quietly. I didn't need to explain. He already knew what I meant. "Me too," he replied, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "I don't think I could imagine a future without you." My heart fluttered, and I reached across the table, linking my fingers through his. "I don't want to imagine it either." And that was the truth. With Noah, the future didn't feel uncertain anymore. It felt full of hope, full of something real. The fears we had at the start had faded, replaced by trust, by the knowledge that we were in this together. We had taken a leap, not just out of fear, but out of hope. Hope that this could work, that we could build something beautiful together. And now we were doing just that. Step by step, we were building a life, our life. As the night wore on, we finished our drinks, our conversation easing into a comfortable quiet. When we finally stepped back out onto the street, the world around us felt alive, buzzing with endless possibility. Noah reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers as we walked. And as I looked at him, I knew whatever the future held, we would face it together.